Hi, this is Michelle Savage with XBRL US. You are here for the webinar, the SEC Filer Toolkit, SEC, FASB, and XBRL US resources. For our webinar today, we will be taking questions throughout the program. And if you have questions, you can just click on the Q&A link on your computer console and you'll be able to submit questions that way. All attendees are muted. Only the panelists will be able to speak. If you have any kind of technical difficulties, please send us an email at support@xbrl.us and we'll do our best to get you back up and online. I'm going to first take you through our agenda today, and then we'll go straight into the discussion. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about issues that we're seeing in corporate filings today, and that'll be a discussion with all of our panelists. Our panelists today are Mike Willis. Mike is Assistant Director of the Office of Structured Disclosure at the Division of Economics and Risk Analysis at the SEC. We also have Louis Mathern, who's the Chief of Taxonomy Development at the FASB, and Campbell Pride, who is the President and CEO of XBRL US. After we finish the issues in corporate filings, Mike is going to talk to us a little bit about SEC observations and resources that the Commission makes available to filers. We'll cover a couple of quick CPE questions. And for those of you getting CPE, please make sure that you respond to the questions by clicking on the radio buttons that you'll see on the screen. And you'll get your CPE certificate in, I believe, within a week or two. Next, we're going to be turning to Louis. Louis is going to talk to us a little bit about FASB tools that they've been developing over the years and making available to filers. And then finally, Campbell is going to talk to us about some tools that XBRL US makes available. Then we'll have a couple of CPE questions again, just to finish that up, and then talk about upcoming programs. So with that, I'm going to go straight into our discussion. And let's talk a little bit about issues that we're seeing in corporate filings. And this again, I'm going to address this to all of our panelists. And it really regards the usage of XBRL data. And periodically, we hear people expressing concern that the data that's prepared by SEC filers is not really being used. Investors and securities analysts are not only unaware of the XBRL data, but they're really just not even using the data at all. So my question for the group, and I think maybe we can start with Mike and Louis, can you let us know, is the FASB using SEC XBRL data? Is the SEC using it internally? And if so, what are they using it for? I don't know, maybe Mike, you want to get started?
Sure, Michelle, and thanks for inviting me to participate. Let me first start with my disclaimer. The Securities and Exchange Commission, as a matter of policy, disclaims responsibility for any private publication or statement by any of its employees. The views expressed today are mine and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Commission or other staff of the Commission. So back to your question, are we using the data? Short answer is yes. What are we using it for? A whole bunch of things. Let me give you a couple. First, we use it to perform data quality assessments and search for issues such as incorrect tagging, use of inappropriate extension, and scaling errors. And just like any other reporting errors, those are very easy to find, and they provide insights on the company's reports for other issues. Second, we use the structured disclosure to identify specific risk scenarios, and that's very helpful in identifying very specific filing reports. For example, if a company has material intangibles, multiple years of operating losses, and net cash flow, but yet no impairment, then that may deserve a closer look. Third, we use the structured disclosures to quickly compare specific sector risk profiles across targeted filers. Benchmarking of disclosures while reviewing the reported inline. And that could be either the numbers where we can see a time series chart, or it might be the narrative where we can do redlining very quickly, directly on the report. Fourth, the structured detailed disclosures enables us to very quickly, like with a mouse click, gather statistics and trends on a specific financial disclosure, such as deferred tax assets across all filers or for a targeted group. And when we do something like that, like for a discount rate or whatever, we have these data quality errors that pop up. And when we see those, it's like a big sign that says, please come take a closer look at this. Next, we also use the structured disclosures for research papers rulemakings and for assessments on how new accounting standards might affect filers. We also use it for assessments of when the registrants actually adopt new accounting standards. And we can do that with a mouse click to quickly identify which registrants have adopted a new accounting standard. And then last, the structured disclosures enable us to more effectively and efficiently perform these analysis and tasks. But I think the audience should know that it's not just the commission staff. The financial statement and notes data sets that we update quarterly on the website, those are among the most heavily downloaded assets on the entire SEC website. We routinely speak with other federal agencies and regulators who are also using that data for their own analysis. So that's some ways that we're using it. Lewis, what about you?
So Mike, we've been using the XBRL data for a number of years. You know, obviously we look at the data as it relates to the usage of the taxonomy. That helps us do a better job in modeling the taxonomy. But frankly, more useful or more important use of the data is as it relates to supporting the FASB, supporting the board projects. And we do that in a couple of different ways. In one respect, it's done to support the ongoing projects. So if they've got an ongoing project around leases or goodwill or some other topic, we will get requests from the project teams to identify usage patterns, and we will report that back to the project teams. But we also will have other requests for the data that are really to help identify any future or potential topics based on what we're seeing in the disclosures. And so we bring that to the staff on a pretty regular basis. We've done, since we started doing this, we've done close to 200 individual research projects, and that'll just continue to grow as time passes.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. I think when, Mike, when you were talking, you touched on the fact that the SEC has clear evidence that the data is being used because the data sets are being downloaded. And this is a question for everybody, not just Mike, but for Campbell and Mike and Lewis. Who else do we think is using the data, and what do we think they're using it for?
Well, we think that analysts are using it and aggregators are using it. And I say that because they call us and they ask us about these data quality errors. They submit emails and ask us to talk to the filers about specific data quality errors that they identify. So that's my experience. Campbell and Lewis may have others.
Yeah, I mean it's similar here. It's a hard metric to get. People don't come up to you and tell you, how they're using the data all the time, because a lot of times it's something they don't want to share. But anecdotally, we know that it's being used, and because they're sharing some of their concerns and talking about the things that they would want to see in the taxonomy to help them better utilize the data. So it's clearly out there. And one of the aspects of that is that they're really wanting to see the as-reported data. That's a really important aspect of XBRL data, as opposed to what you might get from an information provider, where they're normalizing the data in many cases. And with XBRL data, you're able to get right to the source and see what the company intended to communicate. And with the XBRL data, you're able to get that.
Right. Okay, Campbell, did you have anything to add to that, or I have a couple of points I could make just on that topic?
No, I just back up what's being said. We do get lots of different groups like hedge funds and different mutual fund type groups who are asking us questions about the data all the time. So a lot of them are either getting that data through data providers, data aggregators, and some obviously downloading that for themselves. So it's across the board. We also make an API available that we make available to folks, and we've had a huge increase in demand for people wanting access to that XBRL data as well. So there's a lot of users from just even the data that we're making available. So that's across the board. And if you've got anything to add.
Sure. I was just going to mention that we do know that a lot of the large commercial aggregators that pull data from the SEC and they database it and then they make it available to their clients. Companies like Refinitiv and S&P and Morningstar and Bloomberg, we know that they're all accessing the data because it's much less expensive to process. So presumably then their clients who may not even realize that they're using XBRL data are accessing that as well. So let's go on to the next topic about issues. And, do there continue to be quality issues in the XBRL data that you see coming in? We've heard this for a long time. And as I mentioned, we do know that data providers, a lot of them are switching to structured data. Why are they doing that if there are still quality issues?
Well, my 2 cents on this is yes, there's absolutely data quality issues, but there's also reporting issues. But unlike the reporting issues, which have been around since the beginning of reporting, the data quality issues is sort of a new thing. And so it actually provides a lot of useful and new insights for analysis.
Mm-hmm.
There's a correlation between extension rates and restatements. No surprise. But it is a greenfield area for analysis that is new for the analyst community, and that's one of the reasons they're interested in it. And the data quality error rates say a lot about the filer and their processes. So that's my perspective on it.
Right. Now, I'll just add to that. There's a particular case, and I won't name names here, but we had done a research project 2 or 3 years ago around research and development expense. And the charge was to find out how much research and development expense had been reported by all public companies, which was actually a fairly easy exercise. And it was done using the XBRL data. But come to find out that one of the companies that the data aggregators were reporting as having significant R&D expense, and it was showing up on big aggregators' top 10 list, #1 position. It didn't show up on our list at all. And the reason it didn't show up on our list is the filer had reported that item with an extension. Now with some other techniques we might have identified it, but the long and the short of it is it did not show up in our data pool. And to Mike's point about identifying other reporting issues, this particular filer had extended because they weren't actually disclosing their R&D expense in the manner that we might expect. And the line item that it was being included in, which was seems to be much larger than their R&D, because frankly, you can't tell. All the data aggregators were, and I frankly think they still are, reporting it as R&D expense. And so in this particular company, R&D expense certainly didn't justify their placement in the list that we were seeing. And it identified this really important reporting issue, which is not directly related to XBRL, but a reporting issue that users might want to know more about. So those are some really important reasons for getting this as reported data. And when a filer is trying to communicate something that's different than common practice, they have a mechanism to do that. And that's one of the consequences of that process.
Great, thank you. We have a question that just came in, and this is really directed to you, Mike. It's from a private investor who says that they use the financial data set published by the SEC, and they wonder if there's any way that the SEC could update the FDS on a more regular basis, like daily or weekly, when companies report.
So the short answer to that question is that data is available through the RSS feeds that are also in that same part of our website. So if you just go to the data section and look at feeds, there's an RSS feed that is published in real time of the XBRL data. So if they're interested in real time, they can pick it up there.
Great. Okay. Okay, let's move on to our next question here. And this is a question for Campbell. And XBRL US tracks different types of errors and submissions. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of errors? Has it been a decline? Is it a significant decline? Is there a change in the types of errors that you've been seeing over the years? And I think, Campbell, you were going to do a demonstration on this.
Yeah, that's correct. So let me just share my screen quickly.
Okay.
So generally, we have a number of rules which have been in effect for, since, as Michelle mentioned, since 2015. And we track those and we try to prepare some statistics on those, and they're available on our website. So if you can see my screen, I've just brought it up. This is the XBRL US website here. And we have a page for aggregated real-time errors. And then you can see this. I just brought up this is the ones that latest. If you want to see these on our website, you can just basically go to our home site, go to our website, and we've got data quality. If you bring this up, and then you'll see on the right a list basically for aggregated real-time errors. And if you click on that, that'll bring up these. There's 3 pages of these, and these basically track in real time the errors as they come in. So just to talk about a couple of them, we have the first one, which is DQC1. You can see just a downward trend on these. These are where people can put use dimensions and different axes. And basically this rule checks that the appropriate combination has been used for these. You know, if you put something that's not a legal entity on legal entity axes, or something that's not a product or service on the product and service axes. So it's checking all that kind of stuff. And then there's another one. This went up because we implemented some rules early last year, and then it's kind of gone down as people. And this is just making sure, like, simple stuff: assets equals liabilities and equity, shareholders' equity, and liabilities is equal to shareholders' equity plus liabilities, etc. So I'll just scroll down to the non-neg rules, because that's kind of worth having a look at as well. So we just group these here. So you can click here, and then you can go yourself and you can look on these. And I'm just going to go to page 2. And then there's three pages of these. And this is real-time data. It's just querying. As you put this in, it'll query the data and pull that information up. So then you can see as it comes up. I think I may have gone too far, but as that data's coming up, I'll just show you the other one. I think I went past it. That's page 1. So this data, as we get this information in, we basically track it. And if you look across the board, these are some of the other rules. You can see as the rules are implemented, sometimes we will implement the rule, and then we'll start tracking the errors, and then usually they'll eventually go down. So just kind of this website's quite good. It can give you a good idea of where we are in terms of following where the errors are. So if you're interested, you can go and have a look at it. This is the non-negs. This is probably the rule that's been in effect for the longest. This one here, I'll just make it a little bit bigger. So you can see this was initially, we started tracking this in 2014, and you can see as time's gone on, it's dropped. And so Q1 basically represents the 10K filing. So you typically see kind of a spike at the end of the queue. And this is the current Q1. This is the filings they're still coming in. So you see there's a kind of a downward trend. The non-negs are kind of leveled off a little bit. And as we add new rules, then they basically start to, as people see them, they can then start to correct them. So there's a number of ways you can see them. We also track on the website the filing results. We have as companies file, we basically report out what were the errors in a filing. So if you look at this one here, this is basically giving you a cash flow error. We have another one here. This one's someone's used the Israeli member when there's actually a concept for Israel. So basically, there's a lot of detail on our website about these issues. So feel free to go to the XBRL US website. You can look at that aggregated data, and you can also look at individual errors by filing. So I think we'll have a look at this a little bit more detail later. So Shell, should I stop sharing and hand it back to you?
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, let me pull up my slides again here. Okay, I'm going to go on to, I think we talked a little bit about the impact of errors on data users. And I thought maybe we just go straight into, when the FASB sees these kinds of errors, and obviously this is a question, Louis, for you, how does that shape your taxonomy development efforts? Does it change what you do? How does that impact what you do in terms of the taxonomy?
So it really depends on the nature of the error. We're always, when we see issues in the data, we look at it to see if there's something in our taxonomy modeling that may have contributed to that. That could be as simple as a definition, a documentation label that's not as clear as maybe it could be, or just some other modeling around dimensions that might have contributed to that. And so what we commonly do with a new accounting standard is we will review fairly intensely the filings that start coming in immediately after that new accounting standard is effective. So for example, leases, the new leasing standard was effective in Q1 2019, and we started looking at those right from the get-go to see if there were any issues there in the taxonomy that we needed to address, so that by the time we got to the K, we were in a position to have affected some positive changes if needed. And that did result in some tweaks. It did result in some additional guidance that we've published. And that's typically what we try to do for those things that we have some control over. We will also work very closely with the XBRL US Data Quality Committee on any observations that we have about things that we might be able to control. One of the other byproducts of that exercise is that when we're looking at these filings so closely, if we see anything that looks like a reporting issue, we will bring that back to the board and the project teams to suggest that maybe there's some guidance that needs to be provided here, there, or wherever, because we don't think it looks like it's not being interpreted the way it was intended. So that's a part of what we try to do with that.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna move on, and we do have some questions. We'll take those. I'm not ignoring the questions that are coming in, but I just want to go through the discussion points that we had raised earlier. So I want to turn now to Mike, and we're going to ask you a number of questions about what the commission has observed and about the resources that you have. The first question, what do you see as the biggest challenge for issuers in preparing their XBRL data?
Michelle, as a retired audit partner in the software sector, I think the manual last mile of report assembly and review and the related controls, that's really kind of a core reporting challenge. And that translates into then manually tagging or then tagging after you actually assemble the report. All that manual activity translates into lower deployment of automated tools and assessing some important aspects of the report, such as the disclosure checklist, risk-oriented disclosures, benchmarking of numeric and narrow disclosures, data quality, audit assessments, the list goes on. But all those manual assessments that companies do, those are all things that if the structuring is done earlier and if the process is more automated, then the tools can actually be a big benefit to those existing processes and controls. That also would help the professionals to apply their judgment to these topics that they may not actually be able to effectively or efficiently observe in the absence of those appropriate tools. So, things like the open source data quality rules, they just make the task of identifying the data quality issues much lower, and they also help on the data quality side. Now, this also applies to not only data quality, but also to the mapping and modeling of the disclosures. As an analogy, without the highly automated spelling and grammar checker that's embedded in my word processing application, there's like no telling how my emails and memos would come out. The similar challenge is offered with the effective identification and disclosure mapping options of, say, company custom extension elements. We continue to observe a really high range and wide range of what I would phrase as inappropriate or unnecessary extensions and modeling choices. I would highly encourage the registrants to use the open source data quality rules, but also to apply their professional judgment to the structuring of their disclosures.
Great, thank you. One of the questions that we often hear from vendors and from filers is, gee, there's a lot of new rules coming out, a lot of, interpretive information coming out from the SEC, but they'd like to be able to weigh in and have a say in some of what's coming out from the SEC, or at least provide some kind of feedback. What's the best way for them to do that?
several ways to do it. First and foremost is to provide written comment letters on the proposing releases that are posted on the Commission website. Each of those letters are read by the staff and considered in the final rules. Second, submit letters, emails, or voicemails to the respective divisions and offices. You can find those options under the Contact Us section of any of the respective division and office sites. Third, you can attend open meetings of the Commission and or relevant committee meetings like the Investor Advocate meetings. Fourth, you can meet directly with the staff, either individually or with the industry group. I think, as Michelle, you know, we meet with the XBRL US Data Quality Committee twice a year. And finally, there are help systems for issues and for issuers and vendors seeking assistance on specific matters, both in the Division of Corporate Finance and also in the Office of Structured Disclosure. If you want to reach the Office of Structured Disclosure, our email is structureddata@sec.gov. Don't hesitate to send us an email.
Great. That's a lot of different ways to provide feedback. Appreciate that. The next question that I have is kind of back on the quality issue, but it pertains to inline XBRL. And one of the motivations behind inline XBRL was an increase in quality. Have you seen an increase in quality because of inline XBRL with the filings coming in?
Yeah, yes is the short answer, but again, as a retired audit partner, the answer is it depends. It depends on if the filer is using the inline viewer or something like it as part of their report assembly and review process and controls. The inline viewer or something like it makes it infinitely easier to observe those common data quality matters. However, the reporting decisions still rely, as I mentioned earlier, on the sound judgment of the reporting professional. If the reporting professional is using that tool, it can help them quickly identify all the company extensions, but it will not tell the professional if an extension element for, say, accounts receivable is appropriate or inappropriate. That's professional judgment, and that's critical. The same is true for data quality rules. They can help filers quickly identify the targeted data quality error types. However, they cannot highlight at this point in time where your revenue disclosure is tagged with the discount rate element. And yes, that exact scenario has happened. There you go, Michelle.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Tell us a little bit about some of the guidance and tools that the SEC makes available, and how can filers take advantage of them?
It's on the website, on the OSD website. We provide guidance with Commission rules and structured disclosures. Things like custom extension, context dates, negative value, scaling, many other topics. As I mentioned earlier, structured data at sec.gov. There's also the validation rules and previewer process. That includes a wide range of specification validation and warning type error messages. If a filer receives a warning message, it'd be useful to pay attention and work to address that. We also provide the structured reports to the public. As I mentioned earlier, the RSS feeds, the quarterly data sets. You can also pull them down as Excel files for each individual filing. And of course, you can use the inline viewer that's embedded in Edgar. I would like to highlight that the inline viewer and the way we're using it internally allows us to do in substance disclosure checklist, identification of risk-oriented disclosures, benchmarking, time series charting, redlining of the narrative disclosures, and of course, quick identification of data quality issues.
Okay, great. And would you say that a lot of issuers are using these tools? Obviously the SEC is, but do you think that they're using the tools made available by the SEC, by the FASB, by XBRL US?
Absolutely, some are using the tools, and absolutely some are not using the tools. I think everybody on this call took statistics in college and remembers the bell curve, and that's clearly in play here in terms of the use of tools provided. For the Commission as a consumer, it is wildly obvious to us which consumers are using the tools. Conversely, it's also obvious those that are not using the XBRL US data quality rules or the FASB implementation guides, because those data quality errors stick out like a sore thumb. Now, the issuers may not realize that they may have a massive scaling error in their report, or they have an inappropriate extension or missing disclosures, or liabilities reported as assets. but the consumers with the tools do know those things. And what does that say about the report to that consumer? Filers may not hear about those data quality errors, but the analysts write to us all the time asking that we speak with the companies and vendors. So for all the filers on the call, do any of you have, say, over 100 trillion shares outstanding? Probably not, but there's a couple of filers that do, and I've reported that. Reporting professionals should definitely be using those tools and the guidance available, just so they don't run into that kind of situation.
Great. And I think you've kind of answered this question about an increasing quality, with the use of these tools. It sounds like your feeling is if people are using the tools, you can see, you can tell.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, please use the tools. Please use the guidance. If you're not using it, it's very easy to detect that. Go back and kind of look at your extensions to make sure that they are actually necessary, and always apply professional judgment, because that's really at the end of the game, that's what's really going to distinguish the quality of your report. Thank you, Michelle.
Great. Thanks, Mike. We're going to go on to some our first set of CPE questions. And I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll here. So for those of you getting CPE, make sure that you respond to this. How long has the XBRL US Data Quality Committee been in operation? Since 2009, since 2011, or since 2015? So just click on the button that you think is most appropriate. And we'll give you about another 30 seconds here. Okay, I think we're going to shut down the poll now and go to our second poll. Okay, our second question, which of the following is a tool for filers provided by the FASB? The inline XBRL viewer, implementation guides, XBRL datasets, or RSS feeds of XBRL data? We have about another 30 seconds here. Okay, and our next portion is we're going to turn to Lewis at the FASB, and he's going to take control and share his screen, but just another 10 seconds or so here to respond to this question. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the polling now. Okay, and now I'm going to turn this over to Lewis. So Lewis, I've stopped sharing. And if you want to pick up here.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. All right. Thanks, Michelle. So what I want to do, we've got a lot of material, more than this is the first time I've actually sat down and tried to compile all the different things that we have. And so I'm really going to spend most of my time on those items that we think are more impactful. And if time permits, I'll touch on some of the others, but I want to focus on those things that I believe are the most important primarily from a preparer perspective, but they also have utility for others. So the first one, and the one that to give away the answer to the last question, we provide taxonomy implementation guides. And those taxonomy implementation guides and some style guides, which are a little bit more about understanding why we do certain things in the taxonomy, or some of our overall methodologies. The reason we started creating the taxonomy implementation guides, is because contrary to what we thought in the beginning, which was that we felt like in the beginning that the taxonomy would be self-documenting. And it really became apparent pretty quickly that there just wasn't enough information about how to use the taxonomy in the taxonomy itself. And we still try to include things in the taxonomy that help with guidance. So down further here, you see the taxonomy implementation notes and change notes. We can include that in the taxonomy as guidance as well. But at the end of the day, we knew we were going to have to create some guides. And so the taxonomy implementation guides are that thing, and we focus on those for specific topics that are mostly accounting standard mostly new accounting standards. So there's 2 or 3 ways we get at these, or that they get on our list. The first is if there's a new accounting standard that is significantly complex, sufficiently complex that we need to provide some guidance, then we're going to include an implementation guide for that. We also have some topical focus areas that we have spent some time on. Pensions plans is one of those, which is actually into its 3rd stage. It says phase, but it might be useful to think of retirement benefits as the different stages that we've gone through in its development. We've broken it up in pieces. And then we may get input from our constituency that would like us to focus on this, that, or the other thing. And we'll try and cover that as best we can. But for the most part, the preponderance of these are for new accounting standards. And so you can see this list has grown quite substantially over the years. We started this several years ago. I think most of these have a date of 2017, 2018 through current, and then we've got some that are being updated. So leases, as an example, is down on the list, and it's now being updated for some of the things we observed during the year. We've added some new examples. But we keep these maintained, and we only update them if the taxonomy has sufficiently changed that you need a new version. Otherwise, the guide that's here is still useful for current case, current year implementation. So just to look at one of these as an example. So leases, the prior version of leases, you can see here we have it in a PDF version. We also make it available in an inline version. And the XBRL files that support the underlying taxonomy modeling, or the instance that's embedded in this, is available here as a download. So if you want to look at that, you can do so. So some people are quite happy just to look at it in the PDF. And in the PDF, you're able to see, let's just go to one example here. And so here's a lease cost example, and we use what is, I think, become a fairly common markup tagging of sorts in the file, so you can see the lines, and that's all explained what those are. So that's all here, right? And then you can see, what a note looks like. But what I think is more interesting is, if I can find it on my screen. So here, I've already opened this up, but this is the inline. So if you had clicked through on the inline from here, right, so it would have brought you to this document, and it would include this, just like the inline that you guys are filing with the SEC now, and it includes all the same relevant information about the tagging. And so you're able to click on that and see how we've actually tagged it, as opposed to just looking at the line items, right? And this also, and it also has the references back to the codification and so forth. So that's all quite useful. You can search. One of the things that has been covered in other webinars is this ability to include the references, and so that you can search on those references, and so that you can do that to identify all the different places that particular topic. So 842 is the lease topic. And so you can find that here. So these guides are intended to help with specific modeling questions that might not be apparent from the taxonomy itself, and we include multiple examples within each one of the guides. We also include, we also have frequently asked questions, and I'm not sure if everybody knows where these are on the website, but these are things that don't justify a guide, but are still important. We get questions about how to do certain things. So there's a question here about how should I use the rolling maturity elements, or we modified the range axis element in the 2019 release. And so it didn't justify creating a new guide. It's just not lengthy enough for a guide. And so we include these things within the FAQs. So it's useful to think of the FAQs in the same context as the implementation guides. Just recognize that they're typically a little bit briefer and get to the point of the issue faster. The other thing I want to talk about is the codification itself. So I'm not sure everybody recognizes that the taxonomy elements that have references are actually listed within the accounting standards codification itself. And if you were to, let me see where I've got this. So if you were to go to the COD, and so I've pre-selected one here just so we could save some time. So this is revenue from contract with customers, down under disclosures. So we've got a disclosure requirement here. It's under topic 50, subtopic 50, or paragraph 50, whatever the nomenclature is. And you are required, it says, you disclose sufficient information today, and we use a financial statement, understand the nature, amount, timing, and uncertainty of revenue and cash flows arising from contracts with customers. Achieve that objective, and any shall disclose qualitative and quantitative information about all of the following: its contracts with customers, significant judgment, and so on. And actually, I wanted one that had XBRL elements. So down here, any shall disclose all of the following: so revenue recognized from contracts with customers. And so the elements for that are available here. Now, these don't click through to the taxonomy. There's a technical aspect of that we have not achieved yet, but you can copy these, and it will take you into whatever tool you're using to identify your elements and use them in your filing, and then you can build your extension taxonomy or tag away with that. So that is the optimal way to find elements that you need to use for your filing. We have for way too long expected preparers to find the elements from the taxonomy itself. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Whereas if you know whether you're going to the COD or you're going to a proxy for the accounting standards codification, you know what your disclosure requirements are, what your reporting requirements are. And from there, you should be able to quickly identify the elements that you need. And that is the intent of us including these elements within the accounting standards codification. You should be able to go from the reporting requirement directly to the elements you need, not have to hunt for these elements in a haystack of needles. Jumping back, so the other thing that we have changed in the last couple of years is that we are now exposing our taxonomy improvements concurrent with proposed accounting standards. So when an accounting standard is being exposed today, we will, within a matter of days, if not the same day, get our proposed taxonomy changes, proposed taxonomy improvements posted at the same time. And this has multiple benefits. One, it gives filers an opportunity to understand what that reporting requirement is going to look like from a tagging perspective, from their disclosure modeling perspective. And it also affords us a better opportunity to interact with the project teams and give them some feedback on what we're seeing and what filers are seeing. So this has been a really big change from the way we used to do it, and it's really paid huge dividends in our process. Just being mindful of time here, I want to note that in the taxonomy, we also include these taxonomy implementation notes. I'm going to try and show you what that looks like really quickly. So I'm going to demonstrate a couple things here. So some of you probably are already aware of this search capability. So we go in and we save all of these different types of searches. So if I wanted to see the taxonomy implementation notes that were added with 2020, I can come in here and I can click on this right here, right? And the other thing that we've included here is a link back to the implementation guide. So we now have links within the taxonomy that can take you back to the implementation guides we were just talking about, if there's an implementation guide. We also have the change notes here as well. And I would be remiss if I did not talk about our newest innovation this year, which is the inclusion of XBRL US data quality, the DQC rules. We've created a taxonomy that has 3 of the rules in it for this year. Again, we're just getting started with this, but we've included Rule 1, 8, and 15. And Rule 1, I'm just going to bring up, if I can find it real quick. And Campbell touched on some of this from before. This is just off the XBRL US website. So we're including Rule 1, which is the axes within an appropriate member. So again, it's checking for the combination of axes and members. Rule 8 is where you've got calculations that are basically backwards. Good example of that would be if you had assets as a child to current assets as an example. And then Rule 15, which is the ever popular negative values rule. And just to give you a quick look of how we're dealing with that in the taxonomy, we've this DQC rules taxonomy will show this to you. Now, it's important to understand that this is really a non-normative version, but it includes the rules in a way that is easy to read and understand, and can be applied in some fashion. I frankly expect anyone that's applying these rules to go to the XBRL US site and use the rules as XBRL US is providing. But you can see that we have picked these up. And the reason that we're doing this, even though at the end of the day, if you're a vendor and you're going to implement the rules, again, you really want to go to the XBRL US site. The reason we're doing this is to really give this increased visibility and to make it available, to make it more widely available to those that need to implement it in another fashion. And so you can see here, we've got this, we're using the reference syntax, and you can see here that we've got the relevant information you need here about the rule on the relevant element, and it also references the particular rule back within the XBRL US data set. It also includes, we also include the exceptions here, the exclude. So if, for example, if corporate non-segment member is used in combination with any one of those line items, that would be an exception. And so that is, I got too many things open here. So that covers that. I've got 2 other slides here, and I know I'm short on time. These are the items, I'll just mention these quickly. These are the items that are published with each annual release. I don't think they always get the attention they should. The annual taxonomy release notes, they're really brief. I encourage everyone to read them every year. It gives you a quick summary of what's changed in the taxonomy. And the other item, the TC app, This is an item that a preparer can use to compare their current XBRL document with the new taxonomy. It will highlight anything that has changed that's currently in their taxonomy, their extension taxonomy. The vendor that you work with may have something for you, that's fine. But if you don't, this is there and it works. In the annual taxonomy in the Excel version, this is simply an Excel version of what we make available online and your service providers make available. But a lot of people like this Excel spreadsheet. I've got people on our team here that really like to use this because it's easy to filter and do different things with it. So if you're inclined to work in that manner, I encourage you to take a look at it. And I'll only mention one thing on this slide, in that we have our annual webcast coming up on April 2nd. This is where we provide a high-level review of the changes in the taxonomy, so the 2019 to 2020 taxonomies. And Mike will be participating in that, but we also have Sandy Peters from the CFA Institute, and she's going to be sharing with us her perspective on using data and some of the issues and concerns she sees from a user perspective. And so with that, Michelle, I'll turn it back over to you.
Louis, thanks very much for that overview, and obviously lots of tools and lots of things that filers can use. We had a couple of questions, and I know we're running short on time here, but just a quick question for you on the from someone saying that 8 of the implementation guides are currently in proposed status. Do you know when these will be finalized so they can be used by filers as guidance? So
depending on which one we're talking about, it could depend on when the ASU goes final. If the ASU is not final yet, it'll sit in proposed status until that happens. But we try to, again, if it's a new accounting standard and it's gone, and we've been able to expose the implementation guide more or less concurrent with the same timeline, we get it out as final as quickly after that as we can. Sometimes there's a delay for operational reasons, but we're very mindful of getting them out as quickly as possible. And we do expose, we want to make sure we expose them over some reasonable time frame so that, if we've gotten something wrong, we've been able to solicit feedback and get that out there.
Okay, great. And one question related to the DQC rules in the taxonomy. What is the plan going forward on that? I assume that you'll be adding more rules going forward. There are 3 right now, but obviously the DQC has lots of more, right, has a more comprehensive set of rules.
Yeah, we fully expect to add more rules. We haven't, I can't tell you exactly which ones those are. We haven't decided which ones the next batch will be. We certainly talked about a whole number of candidates, but it is fully our plan to continue to add, DQC rules. This is our first year doing this. We're gaining some experience with it. We're building the runway, as it were, and we want to just make sure we get it right before we, start, plowing all those rules in there. But we're very conscious of the fact that there are a lot of rules available, and we do want to get them in there in a timely fashion.
Okay, great. Louis, thanks very much. I'm going to actually take over sharing and share my screen now. Which I think I could just go ahead and do there. There we go. Okay. And I'm going to turn to Campbell with a couple of questions. And I think, we've covered a fair amount of this through when Louis was discussing this, but can you tell us a little bit about the Data Quality Committee? What are the goals of the committee, and how does that work?
Okay, so there's a couple of goals, Michelle. Obviously, one of the goals is to improve data quality. Second one is to really inform the market of how filing should be filed, particularly specific areas of guidance. So we've done in the last couple of years guidance on how to tag for things like revenue recognition and cash flow. The other thing we're trying to do is to get consistency of filings. So we want to make sure that if someone's reporting a disclosure and they have the same fact pattern as another, company, then the data should be represented the same way in XBRL. So that's another goal we want to try and achieve. We also want to try and allow people to use the data. So obviously that consistency is important. So if people want to query the data, they can do that in a way where they expect to get consistent and high quality results. We also provide, one of the goals is to provide feedback to regulators and also to the FASB. So as we see issues in filing, we go back to the FASB, need to get them to change the taxonomy, or go back to the SEC and make them aware of the issues. We also try to make it easier for companies to prepare filings, obviously to go through and check that your filing, if it has errors in it, it can be a kind of a time-consuming process. So one of the things we do recommend is that you run these rules. It's not going to make sure that the filing's absolutely correct. Obviously you have to do other things, but at least it can pick up on a number of the things and a number of errors that we've seen in filings. So at least you can obviously eliminate those from the filing. There was one question I saw in the questions about this. If you do want to run a filing, you can check it against our website, but there is software available, and many filing agents now have incorporated the rules into their tools, so you can run it there. And then finally, we also want to make sure that we're not having conflicting messages in the marketplace. So we don't want to have people recommending guidance one way and then others recommending guidance another way to report the same disclosure. So what we try to do is also publish not only rules, but guidelines on the website that kind of tries to fill in the gaps between guidance that the FASB may have issued as part of the implementation guides that Lewis has gone through, and trying to address some of the more complicated situations that can arise and that people ask questions about. That's the goals.
Great. And Campbell, I think, one of the questions that we also want to ask is, do issuers use the rules? And have you seen evidence that they're improving data quality? And I guess it kind of goes back a little bit to the charts that you were showing earlier.
Yeah, so it's a good question. Obviously you could stratify the population of the market. There's a lot of filers who are actually running them and correcting the issues when they see them. And a lot of people will work through their filing agents. Basically, all the filing agents are engaged at this point in terms of working with us. And so as they see problems in filings, they let us know and ask us to put checks in. And in addition, they ask a lot of questions about, is this really an error? So there's a lot of feedback that's happening there, particularly with the filing agents. There is a certain portion of filers who continue to get data quality errors, and so that's kind of like there's a small portion of the market who's obviously just trying to get the XBRL filing out and is probably not as concerned about quality errors. So obviously that's an ongoing concern that we need to try and reach out to those filers and make them aware that it's not necessarily that hard to fix these, and then to be able to correct them and then adapt the process to do that.
Great, thank you. And another question is, why wouldn't the DQC errors align with validation results generated by a REL? So the question here is, what's the difference between like an REL validation error versus the DQC error?
All right, so I'm not sure if a REL is a validation per se. So there may be EFM rules that are implemented in a REL. So these are rules that are published by the SEC, and these follow the Edgar filing manual. The DQC rules do not overlap with those. They kind of run adjacent to those rules. So if you're getting errors from EFM checks, then obviously you need to correct those. And then the DQC rules will basically on top of those. You can consider it like a stack. And the DQC rules really concentrate on do these filings and do the results in these filings really make economic sense, rather than being like a formatting or more of a content. They're more content based than being like is this a valid XBRL type document?
Okay, thank you. I think we're going to go ahead and do the polls, and I apologize, we did not get to everybody's questions, but we do need to move on to the poll questions, and we will respond to everyone's questions. We just have to go through them and email people directly. So the first poll question we have right now is, which of the following best describes where XBRL US data quality rules are available? The first response is in the US GAAP taxonomy. Second, in the US GAAP taxonomy through certified XBRL preparation applications and through a tool on the XBRL US website, or in the US GAAP taxonomy and through any XBRL preparation application. Which answer do you think is most appropriate here? So we've got about another 25 seconds. Okay, just another 15 seconds here. Okay, I think we're going to shut down this poll and we have one last question. Okay, since public companies first began filing in XBRL in 2009, the quality of XBRL data produced has, responses are declined, stayed the same, or improved. So just about another 30 seconds. And again, for those getting CPE, you'll get your certificate rather in the next week or two. And while we're waiting to finish up that poll, I want to thank our speakers so much for spending time with us today. Mike Willis from the SEC, Louis Mathern from the FASB, Campbell Pride from XBRL US. And I think, bottom line, there are just so many different opportunities for filers to have access to tools that can really help in the preparation process and improve the data quality. So thanks again. And, we'll keep everybody posted on other tools that come out. Okay, I'm going to close this poll now. And just the last thing that I wanted to mention is just some upcoming webinars that we have. We have one coming up on April 22nd, and we're going to have speakers from the CFA Institute, from CalcBench, and from Idacity. And we're going to be talking about data analytics and how data can be used to set policy, analyze investments, and do a lot more. And then we're going to have another session on inline XBRL and cover page tagging. We want to just have a few lessons learned from the filings that have come in so far. And that one, the timing has not yet been scheduled, but it will be in April or May. So look for those in email and sign up for our next one. And we hope to see you in April at our next event. Thanks again very much.